Hi everyone, how are you? Manuel here. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this Encora Talk session, where we're going to talk about how to unlock operational excellence with an AI-driven approach. Over the next 35 minutes, we're going to cover quite a few topics, including how businesses can really leverage AI to run their operational cycles, especially on the cloud, using AI across industries, across different kind of organizations and sizes. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself before we get started. Again, Manuel Cuillo, I'm the Global Vice President of Cloud Services for Encora. I've been with the organization for almost 20 years, and I've been executing a different span of roles from DevOps, cloud. In the past, I also worked very closely with data teams, quality assurance, and managed also some UI and UX teams. The idea today is to use that experience and the things that Encora is doing today in order to present some perspective on how AI can really improve operational performance and efficiency. So let's get to it. First of all, one thing that we are seeing in the industry, it's a trend to start fusing some disciplines that in the past used to be seen as individual disciplines or even islands in some organizations. So application development, application management, DevSecOps, observability were things that different teams were running on multiple organizations of all sizes. What we are seeing is that all that is merging now into a single multidisciplinary team that provides all the capabilities, and usually they are running on top of a cloud self-service approach, like a platform engineering approach. This is something that comes actually not from what I've seen, but from a Gartner study. And that creates a whole motion of being more efficient when you're running your workloads, your applications, either on cloud or actually in any kind of environment. Organizations are now trying to get to a level where they increase maturity by introducing very clear metrics, and those metrics can be pretty much the typical ones that we used to see back in the day, but also some news, for example, DORA metrics. One approach that we have seen that really works for organizations across industries, it's actually enhancing the cloud ops process by using a strategic combination of DORA metrics, ITSM metrics. So as you can see here, you move from a low maturity, let's say, in terms of metrics, all the way to high maturity by introducing more complex, more meaningful metrics. So starting with the typical number of incidents, mean time to recovery, which is a DORA metric, service requests, how quickly you resolve them, all the way to introduce, for example, total cost of ownership, return of investment, which are more meaningful to the business. That's how these days organizations are trying to run their operation, not just from a technical perspective, but a very business aligned perspective for operational efficiency. And of course, cost is big pressure for all businesses. And the more organizations want to get into the technical enablement of new initiatives, they need to be aware of how cost is going to impact their budgets and the future initiatives as well. Typically, when we talk about operational efficiency, there is, again, one side that it has to do with business, and usually the way that it's impacting business, it's through the agreements that we have with our users. So most businesses, they really care about the service level agreements they have with their customers. And then if you go behind the scenes, you will have ways to manage this. From a technical perspective, that usually relies on metrics to measure how long it takes for you to recover from a disaster, how quickly you can react or set goals internally to react to an incident, so that even if you get this gap between what you plan and what you actually did, you don't impact the final agreement with the customer. So SLI-driven kind of operation, it's critical these days. And disaster recovery strategies, highly reliable operation, it's what everyone is trying to achieve. When we go particularly to cloud, I like to see cloud as an enabler of the business. Even though it's a technical topic, it's been here for a while. When you are on the cloud, you're trying to enable other things. You enable your data workloads. You enable your AI initiatives. You enable the operation of your business, whether you are on retail, running a website for transacting, whether you are a media organization that is streaming video or audio, anything, in the end, cloud is just an enabler for that. And when it comes to resilience, there are many aspects of the operation that you can touch. So, of course, anything related to networking and how you manage, for example, your quotas and any constraints that you have to operate and to operate in multiple regions, maybe it's very important. Observability is key for you to be able to not only react but hopefully prevent issues from happening. That it's directly impacted by the architecture that you define, and finally, how you ensure that as you are operating, you can test how you would react to any possible incidents. Right? Again, this is a very technical conversation in nature, but it actually has an impact on the user experience that you would provide to your end users. If we keep going from a technical perspective, um, usually when you're on the cloud, you would have some environment to run. And that's where you start making architectural decisions, where you start enabling a proper operation. So all the way from how you manage your code, how you manage the way that you deploy, how frequently you will deploy, how prone to errors that deployment process is, all the way to the actual deployed system where you need to start observing how everything is performing. That's where you have your metrics, that's where you have your logging. Having a proper governance approach, having a proper observability approach so that you can have early visibility to prevent issues, to react or act before it's actually creating an impact for your users, it's critical. However, this is a very time consuming, bandwidth consuming process, and everyone is looking for ways to start introducing optimization in the operation. That can be optimization from a technical perspective, so there are multiple touch points here you could enhance by using AI, but there are also some process driven optimizations that you can do that don't necessarily have to do with a technical process. It can be a business process. We are gonna touch on that in a little bit. So let's talk about AI. We have covered the technical aspect. We kind of have reviewed what we all know in terms of how the operation of a business goes from a technical perspective. However, AI is not only a technical topic in a sense, right? When an organization wants to get into AI, the one thing that they need to be very aware is how AI is going to have a business outcome. So AI, it's an investment everyone is doing right now, but that investment needs to be aligned to business outcomes. So the more that you understand really what is your landscape of technical enablers, how aware your organization is of the value of AI, of how they should be responsible applying AI, everything together is going to make it easier for you to actually move into a more active approach where you actually start adopting some AI initiatives, maybe not with a comprehensive strategy, but exploring possibilities, building some skills, creating expertise within your team, so that you can then start operationalizing that into a more comprehensive approach. Then you start touching key business processes. You start introducing AI in those processes because now you understand where optimization can be done, how AI can play a part on that. And then you start focusing operational excellence on driving efficiencies across the board so that it becomes a systemic approach in your organization. Now, everyone at this level is going to be thinking how AI can be introduced. They know what are the rules, how is governance being managed for your organization, what can be done, what cannot be done, because maybe there are concerns about data privacy, or maybe there are concerns about budget or costs. In the end, every organization wants to get to a point when this AI is seen as something transformational, not just something to get rid of inefficiencies, but something to transform the operation and finally transform the user experience. As I mentioned, this requires a cultural shift. The organization needs to get in the mood of understanding AI, really considering AI as an option for most of the processes, so things can be done, but considering ethical concerns, ensuring that everything that we do through AI is not going to conflict with any compliance need or any internal policy. Finally, there has to be very clear ownership to ensure that everything that is done is going to be monitored, evaluated, and properly adjusted as time goes and as compliance change, as business needs change. Now, if I am, let's say, an enterprise organization, but actually this applies to any organization, how do I go about starting to enable AI to start thinking on my efficiencies? So there are three tracks or three pillars here. One is the culture pillar, then the strategy pillar, and then the technology. This is the typical consulting approach of people, process, and technology. So people lives in the culture track. Of course, there has to be an enablement, but before that enablement happens, you need to do some assessment. You need to understand where your organization really is. And honestly, every organization is starting from a different place, and probably they want to go to a different place as well. So doing that assessment in terms of where my people is in terms of skills, culture about AI, whether do I have or not some strategy around AI, and how my technology can enable that is the first step. Then on each track, you would move in different stages. So in the cultural aspect, you need to enable your people. You have to train them. You have to make sure that they really understand what AI is capable of doing, whether it's machine learning, whether it's generative AI, so that they, start finding the spots where AI can be introduced. The strategy has to be defined, of course, and it's not just a technical strategy. There has to be policies on, how AI is going to be introduced, what are the limits of what we can do in our organization given our own set of constraints, and then, how people can get access to tooling, how people can start doing their experiments so that we align with regulation, compliance, governance, and everything. On the technology side, that enablement has to be done as well. Picking the right tool in a rapidly changing environment can be hard. So defining exactly which technology we want to introduce because it makes sense with what we have right now or with what we want to do in the future, it's pretty critical. Then identifying specific use cases that really add value to the business is going to be key because, again, there has to be a return of investment. And at some point, when all these things are clear, we move from the foundational aspect of it. That's where cloud plays a part, data plays a part, and the first AI use cases plays a part. You start moving into actual deployment of those use cases, getting some maturity to finally scale. So it's important that we understand this is a journey. So operational efficiencies, introducing operational efficiencies through AI requires a journey. It's not a single project that you can do in just a few weeks or a couple of months. That is very important from the cultural perspective, and identifying, pinpointing specific scenarios where you can prove value so that you win time with your organization, you get buy-in to keep moving forward. It's as critical as the technical piece. It all starts from a technical perspective with designing proper solutions. Many times, the inefficiencies that we have in our operation come from the actual design, the architecture of our solutions. So ensuring that we take, for example, the well-architected framework that your cloud provider has as a reference for you to define your solution is critical because pillars like operational excellence keep including automation, event response, standards for operations as part of what they consider when you are architecting. Same for cost optimization, ensuring that from the early stages you are provisioning your resources in the right way with the right size so that you can be cost effective, but at the same time to unlock further ability to scale in the future as your adoption with users grow. At the same time, again, monitoring performance to ensure that as you move forward, as your organization evolves, you would have visibility on what's happening and how to determine the next step. It's critical. So these are just some of the pillars, but the key message here is designing a reliable solution from day one is very, very important because things would change, but you need to be ready to scale as you go. And for that, if you want to go to AI at some point, this is going to be critical for success. If we get into a deeper level of detail, running an operation means a lot of things. And there are multiple tracks that you need to pay attention to. There are many activities that you will need to perform. So from non-technical aspects like, mapping your critical application, understanding how they are critical to the business, what is the impact of a possible operational inefficiency, it's going to be key because based on that, you can start defining how your customer experience, your ideal customer experience should look like. You can start creating, definition of user stories for you to work on possible improvements. And based on that, you define what are the success metrics that you would follow as you go. Then you can start designing, as I just mentioned, introducing the well-architected framework for your solutions, making sure that you have an optimal view on CI/CD, on FinOps. It's going to be critical because all that is going to be your blueprint, your roadmap to go, and then based on those processes and those activities, you can start thinking how AI, in this case, is going to be an enabler to have the most optimal solution in terms of DevOps, the most optimal solution in terms of my disaster recovery strategy, my observability strategy. These days, you can plug AI in pretty much anything, but you need to have a strong foundation on how you design your solution so that you can then easily or easier introduce AI as part of it. Here you can see a lot of different points. I'm going to present in the next few minutes a couple of use cases for very technical scenarios where you can use AI to enhance your processes. One is observability. The other one is chaos engineering. Actually, many of the things that you see here are subject to that. You can introduce AI to, for example, accelerate your test automation process from creating the code all the way to reviewing that code, ensuring standards and all that. We're going to touch a little bit on that, but again, I'm going to show two specific examples for observability and chaos engineering. But if you look at DORA metrics, for example, mean time to recovery, MTTR, there's a lot you can do to reduce your MTTR by introducing AI in reliability engineering, in incident response, maybe even self-healing. So there's a lot that we can do. In this talk, we're going to just cover some of those possible scenarios. The first one, as I mentioned, is how you can shift left. This is pretty much the DevOps mindset, but there are many things that you can do across your SDLC. When you are on the planning stages, you can use AI, for example, to do your risk analysis. You can take some techniques based on GenAI, for example, retrieval augmented generation, or even fine-tuning, depending on how ready your data is, to better plan for risks, how you're going to react to those risks. If we go into a more technical aspect, in the coding piece, as I mentioned, you can do code generation, and you can do your code generation introducing additional context from your coding standards, from your code review process to accelerate the code generation and the code review so that your lead time, which is another key metric when it comes to DORA, is reduced by accelerating the pace you have to generate new code and take it all the way to production. Code reviews are a big bandwidth, drainer, and you can also introduce acceleration through AI. So there are many things right here that you can do, going through quality assurance, going to, for example, cost optimization when you're actually on the operations. So an AI augmented SDLC is something that is going to be more and more present in any organization these days, and there's a lot that we can do to introduce operational efficiencies here. Some specific examples, as I mentioned, with some sense of improvement that you can consider. Code synthesis, for example. Again, code generation, code documentation, code optimization, and even refactoring can be done by using, for example, GenAI. We have deployed solutions at Encora with clients that have proven to introduce up to 35% of productivity gains on individual contributors. How long it takes for your team members to actually generate, document, and optimize the code. And also the number of defects that are encountered on that code that was generated can be lower down to maybe from 30 to 70% as you go. These are results that we have seen with clients. Code evaluation, again, everything that has to do with ensuring your code has the proper quality, the proper security and compliance needs, is something that you can do. Usually you would do that using people, but you can reduce up to 50% of the code review time by introducing AI, using, for example, GenAI approach, introducing your standards maybe through RAG, for example. Same happens with architecting solutions. You can save up to 50% doing that. And finally, QA. Probably QA is one of the areas where GenAI has created the biggest impact. Test plan creation, test planning as a stage of the process can be optimized up to 80, 90%. and script generation can be reduced in 75% of the time that it required, without losing any quality, without losing any coding standards, achieving the same results that you had before. So these are three specific examples that we have seen that are paying off in your organization. Probably three good places for you to start considering on the technical side. Now, when it comes to the business side of it, they would say, yeah, of course, I understand the technical piece. What I want to avoid is any impact to my users. So AI Ops, it's a term that has been coined in the last few years, but it's not until the last maybe 18 months that really we have started to see specific implementations that tackle that specific point of AI Ops and how I can better observe my systems. In the end, if I observe my system in a good way, I can again prepare before an incident actually happens, or quickly react in the scenario where an incident actually happened, because it happens every day for any industry, any company. Probably the typical use cases when it comes to AI Ops have to do with historical analysis of data, anomaly detection, so I can try to prevent something before it actually impacts my users. Performance analysis, correlate events happening at a given point in time, so I can quickly get to a root cause analysis that enables me to fix an issue. Let's see how it looks from a technical implementation in a second. Some other scenarios you can take across the process. So, for example, directly impacting users, you can have your support to users using chatbots and conversational interfaces. That is probably the #1 use case that you would see out there right now. It has been proven to reduce up to 20% the volume of tickets that or the time required to support tickets. Response times to user queries are from 30 to 70% improved by using this kind of chatbots. But you can do much more. For example, you can be very aggressive and start by introducing just AI enhanced observability to reduce your MTTR, and you can take it all the way to self-healing. If you know that there are typical issues and you have runbooks to fix them, you can automate that by introducing AI. Not just like typical automation, which is very descriptive. If you find this, do this, but create a broader context for a Gen AI driven agent or application to really understand what's happening, review what you have done in the past to solve similar issues, and then self-heal your system. That is something organizations are trying right now, and they have proven to reduce up to 40% of the time that it requires to fix an issue. So again, MTTR. Documentation is a big pain point. It enables a lot of things. You can create documentation using AI, not only for technical processes, but actually for business processes. So this can be actually taken to different areas of the organization. And continuous learning, continuous improvement, AI has proven to be a very good source for enabling faster, better learning on the organization, just by taking a look at meeting transcriptions, taking a look at enablement sessions that happen through video, so that they can then be transcribed and used for further creation of material for improvement, even creating bots or interfaces that enable people to learn. Taking this to a very specific implementation, this is one scenario that actually was presented last week in reInvent in AWS. We have at Encora implemented this quite a few times now. But for example, in a typical native scenario in AWS, pretty much every implementation probably has some level of observability using things like CloudTrail or CloudWatch. You can take the data that has been gathered for months or even years there. You can take a snapshot of that for a reasonable period of time, and you can infuse that into a service that is out there and ready, like DevOps Guru. DevOps Guru has a machine learning models already embedded in as part of the system, so you don't have to really invest on creating your own models. And DevOps Guru is capable of understanding two things: issues that are present on the evaluation time window that you provided, so that it identifies things that you need to fix right away, or it can analyze patterns on how your operation has been behaving, how your workload has been logging information in different ways, so that you can identify potential issues that would impact users in a given period of time. Even more, you can connect something like DevOps Guru and, for example, create an integration with Ops Center. So smartly, you can create tickets for your SRE team to be displaying in Ops Center with all the information after the analysis that was done smartly using DevOps Guru, so that they can timely see what they need to act on, and they don't have to go all the way to do the analysis that you would do by just navigating CloudWatch, navigating CloudTrade, creating the event correlation. Now they just have that information ready in Ops Center. So that's something that can be done, and again, it can be expanded into self-healing. You have the ability to bring some models to evaluate your runbooks and maybe automate the solution right away without having any human in the loop. So this is a typical scenario that you can cover these days. The same thing can be done, for example, in Azure. There are equivalent services. The same thing can be done in GCP. So this is not constrained to any cloud vendor. Now, a different scenario, and this is pretty fascinating because I think this represents a baseline approach that any organization can take for pretty much any problem that they have. So let's take chaos engineering. As you know, chaos engineering, you do chaos engineering when you want to test chaos scenarios in your production environment to see if your architecture, in this case, your implementation on the cloud, can properly adjust itself to avoid any possible impact. So typical thing here is, I don't know, I have a connectivity issue in a specific region. I need to load balance everything so that my users in that region, even though they have maybe a degradation on the service, they don't lose access to the service at all. What you would do typically with chaos engineering, this is a testing scenario. So you need to understand what you have in your architecture. You need to analyze what kind of experiments you would like to run because they represent the typical impactful scenarios you could face. And then based on that, you can use a service, in this case, for example, the fall injection service or the Azure Chaos Studio to code some scenario that you would introduce in your application, in your workload, in your cloud architecture to see what happens. That would be typically the process. Planning, or analyzing, planning for the testing scenarios, implementing the actual code for the testing scenarios, then execute. Using AI, you can solve that very, very easily. At Ecora, this is what we have done. We took something like OpenAI API, what we call ChatGPT or similar. We use RAG to augment the context of this LLM. We introduce information on how to understand chaos engineering. So let's say we have now an expert that knows what chaos engineering is about. We also introduce additional context for this tool to understand how to read an architectural diagram like the one that I was just showing. Then we also added context on how to use the fault injection system or the Azure Chaos Studio so that it could generate code for chaos engineering. Using these different components, using RAG as the method to augment the context, now we have a conversational interface where you can say, to this agent, can you please take a look at this architectural diagram? Let's say we introduce this diagram here. Propose some possible chaos engineering experiments that I could run in my architecture. So, by the way, we also added context on the well-architected framework. So, the model in this case would analyze what I have in my diagram, would extract the services that I have, how they are trying to come up with a solution. They would review the well-architected best practices, and given the context on chaos engineering, it would propose some possible experiments. For example, you can take down some of the instances, you can unplug one, let's say unplug one of the regions where you are serving, and based on that, you can see how your workloads are properly load balanced to a different region, to a different server. Those are typical experiments this would propose. Moreover, you can say, okay, from the A, B, C, D, E experiments that you propose, I would like to generate the code for experiment B because it makes sense to me. And the conversational interface is going to give you code that actually works on either of the services, the fall injection service or the Azure Chaos Engineering. For the purpose of this POC that we did, we just leave it to, let me take that code, copy paste it in the specific service, in this case, let's say AWS fall injection system, and the code actually runs. So you have reduced already, if you just stop there, you have reduced the cycle from planning to generating code all the way down to just a few minutes. And you have a working experimentation. You can do the same RAG approach to many things. You can do it for maybe evaluating the cost of your cloud consumption every month and see where you can have optimizations on how much you're spending. You can take a single process and evaluate where there can be areas of optimization that you can try, providing some information about Kaizen methods, or maybe you can provide some references of similar processes that you have improved and how this process can be improved. So there's a lot you can do doing retrieval augmented generation. Now, I'm going to pause here. We have covered a lot. Thank you for staying here. I would like to take some questions. I think we have covered the technical perspective. We have covered some possible approaches like RAG, like using native services for that. But let me see if there's any questions that I can take from the audience, so maybe we can deep dive into some things. All right, we have one. RPA used to be seen as the way to introduce operational efficiencies through automation. Is the AI path a better way to improve efficiency? Absolutely. Actually, this is a great question. RPA used to be the way to go for many organizations to introduce, efficiencies, because it automated processes in a way that reduced the need for actually humans executing many of these. RPA was a great tool, was a great approach. However, it is very limited in the sense that it is deterministic. You need to really provide what is the step-by-step way of doing things. With AI, for example, the approach that I just explained using RAG, you have the power of, let's say, what ChatGPT or Copilot gives you, which is a conversational interface, able to understand in simple terms what you want to do. But if you now infuse additional context, it can become your expert on a given process, and it can actually automate or generate code to automate that process in a completely different way, because it's not constrained to just a given set of rules that you provided, but it can make decisions, informed decisions, based on the context that you have provided. So that's why you're seeing a lot of conversational interfaces that actually react to what you say in very smart way, usually providing very good responses. And many of the concerns that were out there in terms of hallucination or maybe lack of context are now resolved with either by the cloud providers. Actually, there were a few or quite a few announcements on both reInvent and Microsoft Ignite on how security has been enhanced. But not only that, now you can also get your expert getting a lot of context beyond what the model itself provides. So I would say, actually, you could read a lot of articles where they are saying RPA is even dead for some people. I don't know if it's dead, but definitely Gen AI, it's much efficient, more, that what you can achieve through AI is it's much larger than what our RPA can achieve. So thank you for that question. Let me see if we have one more. What could be an effective strategy to start applying AI to optimize business processes? That's a very recurring question as well. From what we have seen at Encora, what we could recommend is don't try to boil the ocean, as they say. Let's start by identifying one or a few use cases that you think that can make an impact in your organization. Maybe take one, focus on that, understand how much you can return after your investment on AI. And once that you identify one that is really impactful, use that example as a way to get buy-in in your organization. So take that as a little project. You can go with a PO. I wouldn't call POC. I think POCs are done in the industry right now because the value of AI has been proven. But then you can create your own proof of value for your organization. You can take that example, maybe use fine-tuning, maybe use retrieval augmented generation to come up with some scope that you consider would already add some efficiencies or improve some processes in your organization. Deliver that, and based on the results, move to either increase that one or create a parallel track. The reason for doing that is because your organization, if you remember what we were talking about just a few slides before, your organization would need to embrace what's the value of AI. They need to see proof that this AI thing actually works for my organization. You will need to enable your teams to understand how to leverage that POV that you just created. So it's better to start small, ensure that everyone really understands, that really is trained to get the most out of your POV, and then you can move to something else. If you try to do a lot of POCs, many organizations have found themselves with 20, 30, 50 POCs that never made it to production. So the moment that you take one to production, you prove actual operational efficiencies to be introduced, real savings for your organization. I'm pretty sure that you would get buy-in to do a second, a third, a fifth proof of value, and you can start growing from there and scaling from there. Let's see if we can take one more. How do we quantify system resilience post-chaos engineering experiments? This is very good. I mean, in the end, when you are doing chaos engineering, what you're expecting, what you're hoping is that your system actually can react to what you were creating. You are creating chaos, right? You are trying to take down a server. You are creating a scenario where you don't have connectivity to your database. So uh, since it's a control scenario, you always have the ability to go back to your previous state. So uh, in the example that I provided, the quantification of the value of introducing AI on the process of creating a chaos engineering experiment is on how quickly you can get there. Now, that already is taking away many hours of engineering teams planning, coding, deploying, and running experiments. In this scenario, you are taking away all the beginning, the early stages of that process. For the actual post, chaos engineering execution, is going to run just as another automated exercise. And I think the value after that is you would be able to really understand how ready your system, your workload, your cloud architecture is to react in case of a chaotic event, and what you need to do in order to improve. So when the actual event happens, not one that you can control because you can undo the experiment at any point in time if you are feeling like you're getting an impact. But in the future, if that really happens, if it's really a region, it's very unlikely, but if a region on AWS or Azure is not available, you would know in this experiment how you need to react, so you can prepare the automation for that. You could do that automation actually using AI, and you would avoid that real impact on your users for a longer period of time. That can mean millions sometimes, right? So I think that's the value. In this case, we are accelerating the process to plan, and then we are now we have awareness of what could happen if this would be a real scenario. We can act on it so we can prevent the actual damage to end users. So I think that would be the best way to quantify that. Sometimes you can take it, for example, how much your organization would lose if I would lose connectivity for my users in this region. If you can put a number on it, like an amount, it's really easy to sell that kind of things to the business so they can sponsor your process to introduce, in this case, AI or just chaos engineering as a whole. Do we have any other questions? Yes. Agentic development is a topic that starts resonating in the industry. What's the big change? The big change it brings in terms of operational excellence. That's a great question. I think we have been moving really fast in the AI world. Maybe just a year ago, we all were talking about LLMs and conversational interfaces, how to leverage ChatGPT or Copilot or the LLM of that you like. Very quickly we moved into, it's not only about using that tool that someone is providing, but how can I introduce my context so I can increase the landscape of opportunities, of possibilities of what I can do. So we did that with fine tuning. We did that with rack. Now, I think that all that was somehow software as a service. You had software that you use in order to perform some task. Now the paradigm is changing, and now people are starting to talk about service as software. So you can turn a process into a number of for every process, there is people that is acting on it. Let's take, for example, talent screening. You have someone doing pre-screening, then you have someone doing technical screening, you have someone doing soft skill screening, let's say. It's probably different people, they have different skills, but in a way, maybe they have a lot of data they have collected, they have a lot of context they use in order to perform this very well. That context these days can be turned into an agent. So you can take, for example, the pre-screening process by creating an agent that it's very good at doing one task. In this case, pre-screening. How? Taking information from resumes, perhaps, taking feedback that your organization has acquired over years of doing pre-screening, using a lot of questions that you usually would ask to a person in person, and now trying to scan that using AI to identify possible gaps. And that becomes an agent that you request, hey, here's this candidate resume. Would that be a good fit? Or tell me what are the main concerns that I would have given this job description. So that can be an agent. The moment that you have this concept of agent and now you use it for pre-screening, maybe then you create another agent which is very good at evaluating cloud engineering skills on AWS, or it can be even more specific, whatever you need. Agents start to interact. So what you have is an orchestration of multiple agents that you would reach out to, just like you would reach out to people in your organization. Hey Manuel, can you help me screen this guy for a cloud architect kind of role? That's what I would do. Maybe I can take a lot of that and turn it into an agent so I can accelerate the process to do that screening. This is just an example. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the concept is now you can take agents to accelerate tasks that are repetitive, that require certain context to be executed, and start orchestrating those agents so that you can execute full processes. The moment that you unlock this way of thinking, now you can think of something not as a task, but as an agent and how agents interact with each other, just like we do as people, then the spectrum of possibilities is much, much bigger. There's a lot of information that you can start browsing in the internet right now, blog posts that are very interesting. And I think this is going to change the landscape of AI in the next 3, 6 months, just like we saw that in the last few months. So this is big change in the industry. There's a lot of efficiencies that can be incorporated. I don't know if there's any more questions. Let me check. No, I think we're good. So once again, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully this is helpful for you. Every information that we have shared today is helpful for your organization. Hopefully you can start trying things out. If you want to learn more, please take a look at our website, encora.com. Take a look at all the blog posts that we have there. Even our YouTube channel, there's a lot of information. We are more than happy to connect with you. So feel free to reach out. See you soon in the next one. Thank you so much.